Good evening. Thank you all for coming here today. We have our lecture, Women in Egypt 2017, The Way Forward, which happens to be lecture number 66 in the Tahrir Dialogue series, a series of public debates that we've started since 2011. As we start, I would like to invite Dean of School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and former Foreign Minister of Egypt, Dean Nabil Fahmy, to give us his introductory remarks. Dean Fahmy.
Thank you, Layla. Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody here in the audience. As Layla said, we started the Tahrir Dialogues immediately after the 2011 revolution, and since then, it's really been one of the most prominent venues for public debate, public discussions of things that are important to the Egyptian society. We're therefore always proud to offer a topic that's of interest to society, to discuss it objectively, very candidly, but at the same time very objectively. And also when we have the opportunity to have special guests to participate as well, those coming in from abroad, in particular, we take advantage of that. As Layla was saying, the event today is about women in Egypt, 2017. It is the year of women in Egypt, and therefore it's very topical to have a discussion on the topic. It's not coincidental, although that may not have been the original reason why we use that, but Egyptians, as many of you know, like to call themselves the mother of the world, so that's also a synonym to the importance we give the role of women in our society. This evening, what we're going to do is we will have a panel discussion that will be moderated by my former colleague, Ambassador Mona Omar, the Assistant Foreign Minister, and presently a member of the Council of Women. We also will have with her Hania Shulani, who is a senior researcher in the Economic and Social Research Center here at AUC, Mr. Mohammed Nasiri, who is the regional director of the UN Women's Regional Director for the Arab World region, and Nihad Abu Umsan, who is a senior lawyer focusing on gender and development issues. As our special guest and as our keynote speaker, we have the honor of having with us the Foreign Minister of Finland, Mr. Timo Soini, who is visiting Egypt, attended the Sharm el-Sheikh conference, at the same time is giving us the honor and the pleasure of coming to the university here and to speak at the university on this issue in particular. Before speaking, I want to really thank the Embassy of Finland. The Embassy has been tremendously gracious and helpful in jointly hosting this event with us and providing support for us to be able to arrange the event, both through its translation and some refreshments in the back that I hope you will enjoy when we finish. The Foreign Minister, Soini, has been a senior politician in the Finnish government for years. He's the founder, one of 4 founders of the Finns party in his country. He's chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee and, of course, served as well in the European Parliament. I'm sure he'll have a very insightful contribution to make. Regrettably, the minister, as has been the case for any of you who have worked in government, still has another event to go to after he finishes this event. When you come to 2 cities in Cairo in a day and a half, besides traffic, you're very, very busy with a lot of events. So the minister will give us his insight. He will speak to the topic and his experiences, but he won't be able to stay in for the whole event. He may attend part of the panel, listening to that, but does not have enough time to sit by and also take questions at the end. But nevertheless, I'm sure what he says will be food for thought and food for discussion by the panel itself. Minister Soini, I invite you to take the floor, sir.
Distinguished Dean, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm honored to be here in amazing historic city of Cairo and to take part in this most important dialogue today. Today I want to talk about the rights of women and girls. It is sometimes said that these rights can fully be realized only in the post-industrial advanced society. I come to offer a different perspective. Finland celebrates 100 years of independence next month. During those 100 years, my country has changed from the poor agrarian country into a relatively prosperous, safe, and stable place. Maybe the single most important reason behind that success has been the education of girls. The education and also healthcare of every girl and a boy has worked for us beyond what anyone could have believed 100 years ago. The success of Finland as a country is to a great extent linked with improvements in the equality between men and women. By addressing this inequality, we have allowed women to make full use of their potential. This has benefited the whole society. In Finland, women have a higher level of education. They work mostly full-time. The share of women in political decision-making in Finland is high. Finland was the first in the world to extend universal suffrage, the right to stand for elections to all women and men, 1906. Largely thanks to the tireless efforts by the activists in the women's rights movements. Almost half of our MPs today are women. All the highest political positions in Finland have been held by women. In private sector, the number of women directors in business and enterprises is amongst the highest in the world. Here in Egypt, there is a growing recognition of the crucial role that women play in the advancement of the country's development. President Sisi has declared this year as the Year of Women to shed further light on the issue and promote women's rights. I look forward to hearing more about what concrete actions have resulted from this proclamation. The Finnish achievements in advancing women's rights are a result of the long tradition working together with various organizations, including political parties, trade unions, and NGOs. In our global work to advance women's rights, we actively support a number of international organizations and national NGOs to promote women's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, one of our key partners is UN Women, and I'm honored to share this panel today with the Regional Director Naziri. Since its establishment, UN Women has been a driving force in promoting normative change and advancing women's rights in the international arena, within the UN system at the country level. Organizations such as UN Women are needed because women's rights are being violated and threatened in every part of the world. My own country, Finland, is no exception. We have tried to eliminate violence against women in my country for decades with far too little results. In Egypt, the national strategy to combat violence against women was adopted in 2015, and the challenge now is to implement it. We need to start by ensuring that the men and boys are on board in this struggle. We also need to begin with the basic message that a woman is never to blame for violence directed at her. It is the perpetrations of the violence that are guilty, never the victims. The 2030 Agenda has brought to our attention the gaps that remains in the realizations of women's and girls' rights. We need to focus resources and attention to ensuring these rights are respected everywhere, both in the public and private sphere. The international human rights framework provides the tools for their realization. What is lacking is action. Distinguished guests, human rights are universal. This often repeated phrase implies that the governments can invoke cultural, religious, or historical reasons as an excuse for human rights violations. The notion of universality carries specific importance for women's rights. Governments must not put obstacles to the human rights of female citizens. The concept of security has evolved. Security is no longer perceived merely in military terms. The recognition of the indivisibility and the universality of the human rights, rule of law, and a pluralist democracy are cornerstones of this broader security thinking. Only societies where fundamental human rights are respected are, in the long run, stable societies. There is a growing awareness of the significant role played by the women in countering and assisting in terrorism and violent extremism. Because women are often highly influential in families, communities, and governments, their proactive participation in counter-terrorism efforts can effect positive change. However, there has also been a steady increase in the radicalization and recruitment of young girls and women by terrorists. Radicalization poses an enormous threat to women and girls because not only does it limit their aspirations and futures, it is also directly limits their daily life. In radicalized communities, women are restricted from moving outside their home and from engaging with their communities. If we do not show to our youth, especially to young women, that there are opportunities available to them to participate socially and politically, for work and education, then they will continue to be drawn into organizations that offer them such opportunities, albeit on false pretenses. If you have nothing, you will take anything that is offered to you, no matter how bad the deal is. Radicalized groups also offer essential social services and protection, which are particularly attractive for women who are divorced or widowed and are struggling to fend for themselves and their families. To better understand and deal with the dynamics underpinning violent extremism, the EU is funding crucial work implemented by UN Women to explore a gender-sensitive approach for preventing violent extremism. In an increasingly interlinked world, we are more connected than ever before. Conflicts do not stay within the borders of the countries, and we cannot afford to ignore them. The ones who suffer most from conflicts are women. And when women suffer, the society around them starts to crumble. Since the resolution on women, peace and security 1325 was adopted almost 20 years ago, there has been a lot of talk about the need to involve women in a conflict resolution and peace building. Still, every time we see images of negotiations to solve the major conflicts, what we see is a group of men in suits, like me. Where are the women? Why are they not at the tables where the decisions are being made? To get women into the seats around those tables, we need to ensure that women are getting into positions of power at every level of the society, so that when the delegations are selected to the peace negotiations, excluding women will simply not be possible. To make real progress on participation, it is necessary to see more partnerships between governments and civil society. Civil society is indispensable for women, peace and security implementation. It also plays a significant monitoring role. That is one of the reasons why Finland is supporting organizations such as the National Council of Women in Egypt, who is aiming to increase the participation of women in political processes at all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, to achieve sustainable peace and prosperity, we have to be fully committed to it. Full enjoyment of the human rights of women in all fields is what we must strive for. We still have work to do together as partners. Together we will make it. Together we can succeed. We have a pledge, we have a responsibility for every girl and a boy in this world to give their chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Timo Soini, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Finland. And now we proceed to the second part of our lecture today. We have distinguished speakers and moderator. The session will be moderated, as Dean Fahmy mentioned earlier, by former Ambassador Mona Omar, who is board member of the National Council of Women in Egypt and president of Salima, an NGO that aims to increase awareness on domestic violence and provide victims with support. We have Dr. Hania Shulami, who is an anthropologist and associate professor at the Social Research Center at the American University in Cairo. We have Mr. Mohammed Nasiri from the UN Women. He is the regional director for the Arab States region. We have Ms. Nihad Abul Omsan, who is a senior lawyer and chairwoman of the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights. And please enjoy. Thank you.
What? Yes. Thank you.
So good afternoon. We're very honored and happy to be among you all here at the American University with this distinguished speakers really from many places. I was very pleased with the speech that was done by His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and what he said about the accomplishment of the Finnish women and the Finnish society in this regard is really something that we have to make use of for the experience. And here in Egypt, I hope that we can really make some use of it. Especially what you said about Finland would have not been in that prosperous if it was not about the women's equality with the men. I think this was a real say. Today, as was said before, we have a panel of distinguished guests, and I would like to start by just saying some facts, statistics and facts about women in Egypt. The number of males exceed number of females in Egypt, because this is what everybody thought was the opposite, that the males in Egypt exceed the females. No, we have the opposite. The percentage of 106 male to 100 female. The other percentage is the percentage of illiterate women is 30.8%, 38% in rural areas and 20.6% in urban areas. Though it decreased from 37% in 2006 to 30.8% in 2017. But this means that if we go with the same rate, we won't be able to eliminate illiteracy of female before the year 2067. I want also to mention that the percentage of female getting a university degree increased from 9.6% in 2006 to 12.4% in 2017. Female school leavers among female is 134,000 in primary school, 242,000 in preparatory phase, and 224,000 in secondary schools. These figures are being analyzed for the time being. Early marriage figures are not as high as reflected in the press and in some of the media reports. They don't exceed 2.4% of the total number of married female in Egypt. I'm sure that these few statistics are a little bit different from what was announced in the media in many reports. I made sure just to say these very few statistics because now we have to work on the messages deducted from this, the illiteracy, the growing number of population, and the school leavers. This will give us a lot of work, and especially that we have now a strategy for women that is planned till the year 2050, and I think it is a long way to go for us here in Egypt, though we achieved a lot of progress. I would like to start really by Dr. Hania, and I would like to hear your assessment, maybe in about 5 minutes, about the current situation, status of Egyptian women.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm really jealous. I don't know if it's Finland or GAP, but to talk to a whole with an audience in AUC is truly a unique experience. So first of all, thank the audience for being here. I looked briefly at the Finnish government's position on women and found some really, very delightful terms of phrases like equality brings us joy. And I really found that that's quite heartwarming, that for Finland, it's not just a question of ticking a box, but that equality brings us joy. There's talking about 100 acts of equality. So there's a great spirit behind the acts. And that's where I want to focus my 5 minutes of intervention. It's the spirit of equality, not the checklist of equality. Now, one approach to women's equality is the approach that says, what is good for women is good for society. So if we educate women, they will be better mothers. If we give them health services, they will have fewer children, and so on. That investing in women is a way to invest in development and invest in society. But I think this has been the position in Egypt, and it has a dark side, because my position is that what is good for society is good for women. So it's difficult to have meaningful representation without democracy. It's difficult to have a commitment or a political commitment to women without supporting a civil society or a feminist movement. There can be no equality without a feminist movement. This is a fact of life, of the world. There has to be women who are engaged in confirming women's rights. It's not something that is given. Women's rights are not given. Women's rights are claimed, they're lived, they're acted. So defending these institutions is very important. I think Egypt is doing very well on two fronts. One is the front of representation, because there is a political will for representation, meaning numerical representation, the highest number of parliamentarians, and I'm sure that Nihad will, this is really her field, but just to say that in terms of the checklist of women's equality, we're doing really well. We're also doing very well in terms of access to education, access to health, access to even employment is improving. But what we're not doing so well in is agency. It's women claiming these rights and being bothersome and argumentative and difficult and insisting on the dignity that comes with equality. And that lack of voice, I think, is because of somewhat a general political malaise. It's because of a weak or weakened civil society. But it's also because the recipe for women's equality that has been the recipe developed by the development discourse, by the UN and other bodies, which has really become watered down into a set of actions or arrangements, has outlived its purposes and needs to be renewed. What we're really doing better now in Egypt is in terms of social protection for women. So the new welfare programs, the cash transfer programs, the access to alimony, the simplification of the procedures that women need to go through to claim their rights. I think we're doing very well in that. But just to conclude, that we have a tremendous demographic change. We are a very young society, and I think that all of us need to be thinking about the future of women's equality, not the past of women's equality. And the biggest challenge, I think, to women's equality, and that's my last point, is what I call a crisis in masculinity. We have focused so much on women that we have really forgotten men and boys. And men and boys are a subject, I think, that for future research, they have to be not just enjoined as partners in development or as partners, as the UN speak like to say, but in and of themselves, the crisis of work, the crisis of sexuality, the crisis of addictions and dependency, the crisis in masculinity and politics and violence and so on, they're also victims of violence. So I would hope that for the future we would be inclusive in terms of thinking of equality, not in terms of women and girls only, but in terms of all Egyptians. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear. Ms. Abul Qumsan, I hope that from your experience working on the field, on the ground, you can tell us really what are the challenges, the real challenges that are facing Egyptian women. Please. Thank you.
There is a PowerPoint. Do you know? Good afternoon. It's an honor and pleasure being with you, and thanks for AUC and Finland partner to invite me for this important event. And actually, Finland experience in many fields, especially education, is very inspiring. And because I believe of using new tools of raising awareness, so I started making a TV show, and I used Finland experience to aware about the importance of education of girls and the way they have their important experience. Back to the point, actually I enjoy very much when I listen to Hania. But all the time we have differences, because I'm afraid so much when we talk about what is good for society is good for women. Sometimes it's real, it's important, but sometimes it make misleading for the stakeholders or politicians when it comes and make women issues generic. When we look to the status of women in Egypt, I believe we made important steps forward, but we have a lot of challenges we have to go through. And before speaking about numbers, I always say some weird sentences. I would like to see women as illiterate as men. I am not working for equality in a level of education, but let us have equality in a level of illiterate. As Dr. Ambassador Mona Omar said, the illiteracy among women is a 3-double illiteracy among men. So when we support women education or focus on women education, we try to reduce discrimination against women. And dream of poverty among women equal poverty among men, or control of land, women control on their land or receiving their inheritance as equal as men. Women control 1% of land. So when we focus on women issue, it is something very important. We not ignore boys and men rights, but it's important to recognize the gap is not an easy issue to tackle. So in 2017 is a women year, and we have important step in a level of political empowerment. We have steps forward. We have 90 women MPs for the first time in our parliament, but we still have 8% in the cabinet ministers. We still have no women head of universities. We have one governor, one woman out of 27. So we still have a lot to do, although we have steps forward. In a level economic empowerment, also according to gender gap, Egypt have a little steps forward, but we have a huge rate of unemployment. Women unemployment is 24%, comparing with 9% among men. So my dream is to make women unemployment equal as men. Let us work to let this 24%, 9% in equal. We still have a domestic violence in a way makes our president talk about early marriage, talk about domestic violence, and National Council of Women preparing a unified legislation or a unified law to try to eliminate or to, I hope, end violence against women, especially related to domestic violence and sexual harassment, which is a big issue. In a level of law, which is my beloved field, we at 2017 start making good steps related to female genital mutilation, to make it a big crime instead of minor crime. And sentences reach to 5 to 7 years. The most important is to have a mechanism for implementing, to make the whole judiciary system warm for women to complain, starting from the police station, investigators, and court, the way we investigate these cases, how women trust the whole judiciary system to engage with is a challenge. And we try to work hard with the whole stakeholders in this arena to facilitate and make this area. We have units in police stations for women, not all police stations, but some of them, and some of them prove success in this area. We have discussion with persecutors and especially Office of General Prosecutors, to have more and more improve the process of investigations, and hopefully this will impact better enforcement of the law. What we're looking for, what we want. Of course, I want end of lack of employment among men and women. Not equality in unemployment, but what is needed to do this is to review the legislation. All the time I was talking about political will, and I believe we have now a political will. When the head of the state speaks about women, and his discourse is very encouraging, this is from civil society perspective, this is very important. I'm not speaking about political issues, but I'm speaking about gender perspective. This is very important because all the time we see stakeholders, governors, for instance, they're not convinced any word we say. But once the president mentions something, they open all closed doors. That's why to have a political will and a political pro-women discourse is very important for us as NGO, regardless our situation, agree or disagree with anything, but according to gender issue, it is very important. It opens the doors, and let the officials listen to us. When they listen to us, we can build a cooperation. So what we want is to go more in a level of implementation, in a level of process, in a level of regulation. When it comes to women's rights, most of people believe it's just an articles or words in articles of law. But actually who implement or who work in the field, we always recognize 4 levels when it comes to the legislation, when it comes to women's rights. First question we ask, do we have law? Sometimes we have a phenomenon and we don't have law, like sexual harassment 10 years ago. If we have law, this law is have a discrimination or not. If we have a perfect law, sometimes we have a perfect law, like violence against women, like rape cases. The sentences reach to the death. What we need more. But we look for the enforcement, and the 4th level, we have to see engagement of the people with the whole system. Here is the area of awareness raising, and we may talk more when it comes to the discussion. I thank you so much. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but it seems the time is very short. Thank you.
Thank you, Nihad. It's only that there are so many questions that you will be answering now, and I don't want to really take the time, especially that we are getting questions from the floor. So, Mr. Nasiri, with your experience in the region, how do you compare the situation of Egyptian women to the situation of women in the Arab world?
Thank you. Allow me to stand in honor of your presence, and I will take the podium. And I've been put in a very difficult situation because I'm speaking after Hania and Nihad, and both are very eloquent speakers. And I do need to read, given that I have a lot of statements. So forgive me for that. There is a saying in Arabic that goes as أول الشجرة بذرة, a tree begins with a seed. And indeed, understanding masculinities and gender equality in the Middle East and North Africa was a seed waiting to be planted. Hania spoke and zoomed into the situation in Egypt. She ended by saying, well, there is a crisis in masculinities and we need to investigate more. So I'm zooming out, and at your request, I'm going to speak more on the region, not to compare, because I think it's very difficult to compare apples to oranges, and the region is very, very different. The different challenges in different countries impose different results, so we were not going to compare. But we've been on the journey to get here, to get to the point where we have cracked open a dialogue and a discussion on masculinities, on women's rights within the Sunni Islamic context, on women and men in the family for some years now. It has not always been an easy road, but it has been a rewarding one. It has been one of inspiration, of hope, of progress, however slow it may seem, but also one of desperation, one of wanting to pull my hair if I have some left, and one of sheer frustration. The topic of what does it mean to be a man in the Middle East, as you rightly said and referred to, Hania, the crisis, is one that resonates with me. I'm a man, I'm an Arab, I'm a Muslim, but that is not all that defines me. In fact, at times, these definitions limit me because of the burden they carry. The journey to get here is frustrating at times because I do not understand what more we need to sell the notion of equality. It should not be a commodity that needs selling. We know that societies will prosper when women are equal to men. We know the GDP of a country will increase. We know the cost of society decreases when violence against the cost on society decreases when violence against women also declines. We know that peace agreements are more likely to last when women are actively involved as leaders. We know that governments in which women also govern also have policies that better serve their nations. We know, yet here we are. And where are we? Since 2011, I have witnessed the region I cherish most, the region that fills my heart and runs through my veins, go through change, transformation, so much hope. I was among them who held their breath as an international civil servant in Yemen at the time, hoping that this was going to be it, and that we, as citizens of the Middle East, Arabs and non-Arabs, had done this ourselves, had broken free of decades of stagnation under regimes that do not benefit society, that did not allow us to grow and prosper, and that maintained the status quo based on inequality. I witnessed my Yemeni sisters excited about possibility of claiming a space that had long been denied to them, and they claimed it. 30% of the initial National Dialogue members were women. It would be our time to shine, I thought. We would show the world that the region will yet again be a hub of knowledge, of progressive thought, of poetry, of art, of music. We would break free of the stereotypes surrounding our culture, of the negativity that we hear from the West, and we would show that we too, women and men, can rebuild our society on the foundations of mutual understandings, of respect, of freedoms, and yes, of equality. I'm not naive. I knew it would be a long road. I did not anticipate it would lead us to where we are today. 17.7 million people are displaced as a result of the war in Yemen, in Libya, and Syria, and let us not forget, 5.5 million Palestinians cannot go back to their homeland. The same women who took to the streets have now regressed back into their homes, into the shadows of our societies, starting from scratch to find their voice yet again and risking their lives to do so. I still believe in change being possible, and I still believe in the region is often fairly untreated and unfairly treated, and its citizens all put under the same comb. And in the midst of this turmoil, there has been some hope. Women's organizations in some countries did find a voice in recent years. Youth movements gained momentum, and issues and topics such as the notion of masculinities were tabled. We found a small entry point and we used it. On the global scale, member states have signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals. Tunisia has passed the single most comprehensive bill on violence against women in the region earlier this year. Jordan and Lebanon have repealed laws that grant a rapist immunity if he marries his victim. Member states have spoken out against child marriage and FGM. We have near gender parity in the education gap. Topics such as domestic violence are being discussed, and we have religious authorities willing to address sexual violence in conflict as a pandemic that is non-Islamic. Egypt has a quota of 25% of women in local councils and a constitution that calls for equality. Palestine has opened up the first one-stop shop for survivors of violence in the region, providing a comprehensive list of services across sectors. Most recently, women will be allowed to drive in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. While a small victory, and one that certainly should not be hailed as a large win, it is the overturning of a topic that has long defined the Kingdom's approach to gender equality. Of course, we also have the flip side. The statistics you will know, reservations notably linked to family and Sharia law on CEDAW, Palestine and Tunisia being the exception. The global average for women national parliamentarians are 23%. We are 18% in the region. 21% of women in the Arab states participate in the labor force compared with a global average of 50%. With the current rates, this will take us 145 years of Arab countries to catch up with the average gender gap in female labor force. 37% of ever married women in the Eastern Mediterranean region have experienced physical and or sexual intimate partner violence. So how do we merge this? How do we merge the progress in the minds and the hearts of many, the progress in some cases on paper, and with the attitudes, the change in behavior? That is what we have been trying to do, not only with providing immediate relief, quick wins, services such as support to survivors, but also with a long-term agenda, that of keeping the conversation, the men, women, boys and girls started for us back in 2011 when they called for change. The International Men and Gender Equality Survey images in partnership with Promundo provided one such opportunity. Across 4 countries, we asked questions of men to understand them as well as women and their hopes, aspirations, frustrations, and to take on women's empowerment. While many responses were disheartening, reminding us of the notions of inequality are alive and well, many were also inspiring. Stories of fatherhood, of men wanting of their wives and sisters what they have, stories of fear, of pressure to provide in a climate where they cannot. Equally, we have been working on the notion of the family and the definition of equality within the family. Our partner Musawa have used a feminist and rights-based lens of understanding and searching for equality and justice within Muslim legal traditions. We cannot make a case for a shift in attitudes if we do not have the facts to back up this. Musawa is demonstrating how we can shift understanding based on men's authority over women to one based on equal partnership between spouses, parents, and children. A tree does indeed begin with a seed, and our tree is just starting to spurt. There are setbacks, days without growth, but we are moving in the right direction. We are asking the right questions. We are seeing the positive responses, the engagement in such dialogues. We are seeing change. It is in the man willing to speak openly about his struggles, about the joys of fatherhood, in the women claiming their space, risking their lives and standing up to their societies, we are seeing the change, and that is why there is still hope, and that is why I do what I do, and that is why I'm humbled to be here today. And I apologize, Ambassador Mona Omar, for taking so much time.
Thank you. So I hope that after the speech, we can go back to the panel discussion. And I would like to go to Dr. Hania and ask her, what do you see as the main challenges and barriers to the women's equality and rights in Egypt?
I think that both Mohammed and Nihad spoke very eloquently about some of these of the issues or the barriers. I honestly believe that our most important challenge is to reimagine what equality means in the future. Because when we talk, as Nihad rightly said, we could compare rates of unemployment and rates of employment. But what happens when work completely changes? And I'm not here just talking about the usual AI and robots. I mean that really work as a means of welfare. That's why we work, to make an income, to be able to eat and care for our families and so on, is no longer going to be a viable proposition very soon. So we need to get on with our imagination of the future. Employment is not going to be a measure of equality. Education that doesn't lead to some form of welfare or some form of qualification, or that doesn't enable you to compete, is not equality. It's not going to be good enough. What's the point of getting an education if it does not enable you to compete globally? Democracy even, the meaning of democracy is really changing. I'm not sure that the current institutions of representation and so on are going to be that relevant in the very near future. So I think the biggest barrier to equality and to the rights of women and men is the barriers to the freedom to imagine the future in which there is equality, but the future is radically different from the present. So I think we can't go on talking about education without talking about proficiencies in education. We need to talk about security, not only in terms of what the streets are like now, but about the security for wider mobility. We keep thinking that mobility is just from the village to the factory, but really wider mobility. We have to include the suffering of refugees in our part of the world, because these borders, once they're back, these refugees are not going to be able to go back fully to their countries. The world, this kind of upheaval. So I think that's one barrier. The other very important barrier is the barrier of what we call culture. And I think what we call culture, we're always thinking about women and culture in terms of what we call al-mawruth al-thaqafi, of tradition. But really, culture is a living thing. So the culture of sharing, of love, of intimate relations, we do need each other. And I regret very much that some of this aspect of the intimate relations, these kinds of freedoms, this kind of humanity and humility is getting lost in our focus on gender equality as an aspect of development. And I think the development paradigm doesn't include this humanistic and the issue of love, the issue of intimacy, I think is also a problem.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abul Qumsan. What do you think is the real model that can be applied in Egypt? You heard the foreign minister of Finland talking about the model of Finland. Do you think that it can be applied here in Egypt?
I believe we cannot take one model and say it could be applied in Egypt. And there is several important experience, Finland one of them, and the ranking in the world show Finland #1 for years in many areas. So there is a key issue we have to learn from this experience. But let me also point to another experience of Nigeria, for instance. It's a country in Africa, and they have lack of employment, and a small procedures has been taken in the recruitment law. The Ministry of Finance of Nigeria, the ex-minister, she changes the regulation of recruitment law, and said any bidding should have a criteria to be accepted. The states, any state in Finland and in Egypt, in any country of the world, is the biggest investor. The state who makes the roads, who makes the cities, and all businessmen want to grow, they work with the state. So she made a small change in the regulation, said that one of the criteria of any bidding, the number of women employment, the number of jobs offers, and gender balance, men and women. In the beginning, infrastructure, which is masculine field, they refused, definitely. They said they making routes in the forest and in the desert, and how they recruit women. And after they found it's a law, and here all the time I believe it was a law, they start to improve women work environment. To recruit women in infrastructure, you have to have buses, not recruiting men in the trolley or anything unhuman cars. You have to have a place for food, bathrooms. You have to have working hours, because women have to go and back in a certain time. So including women in this experience improves the work environment for both men and women. So before, men were working for 18 hours. Nobody cared. But women, they have to go in a certain time for their motherhood role. So buses go at 8, back at 5. There is a human places to get rest in this. So starting from a #1 state in the world to the last state we believe could give us something, we can find a solution for many of the challenges we have and learn from them.
Thank you so much. I don't know if we better open the floor for questions, as we have only 15 minutes left till the end of the discussion. So please present yourself.
My name is Dr. Saeed Saleh. I'm a professor of Buddhist sociology. From reading the history of the area when it comes to women's rights, I see two historical figures. Ataturk in Turkey, Bourguiba in Tunisia. And they were able to challenge the culture, the customs, traditions, even religious authorities. Do you see anybody in the Middle East today, any leader in the Middle East, who is really committed, not lip service, not just for votes, for the rights of women, for the advancement of women in the Middle East? Thank you.
Maybe Mr. Nasiri would...
كذا سؤال ولا ناخد كذا سؤال ولا نجاوب؟
Okay, so we take some other questions at the same time. Please.
مساء الخير. أولا نشكر المنصة، وخص بالذكر الأستاذة هانية على آرائها الإيجابية. ما تقوم به الأستاذة نهاد هو ضد الدستور. الدستور ينادي بالمساواة بين الذكر والأنثى وبين جميع المواطنين. طرحت سؤالا عجيبا: ماذا نريد الآن؟ كأنها تريد نسوانة الدولة وتأنيس السلطة. ماذا تريدون أكثر من أن 70% من البيوت العربية تقودها امرأة، والأم مقدمة على الأب، والأخت في أي نزاع مقدمة على الأخ داخل أي أسرة عربية. التعاطف عالي جدا مع المرأة داخل الأسرة العربية. ما تقولونه هذا كان قبل 70 عاما. تقدموا وانظروا حولكم الآن. الوضع تغير الآن، في أزمة ذكورية والذات أزمة رجولية. الرجال في أزمة حقيقية. انظر إلى العنف الذي يرتكب ضد الرجال من ناحية زوجاتهم، تمنعهم من رؤية أطفالهم، ولا أحد يتحدث عن هذا الموضوع. فلا يمكن نحن في عام 2017 ونتكلم بحديث 1917. الحقوق ميسرة وفي متناول المرأة، وادخلي وزارة الصحة وشوفي أعداد النساء الموظفات الذين لا يفعلون شيئا، وإذا حذفت عدد السواقين والرجال الأعمال الشاقة تري في القطاع العام أغلب الموظفات نساء. إذن هنالك الكثير مما تم تحقيقه، وأرجو التوازن في الطلب والنظرة الشمولية. هذا هو ما الثورة الفرنسية نادت بالمساواة والإخاء والحرية، ولم تنادي بالنسوية ضد الذكورية. من يسمع بعض المتحدثين يحس أننا نحن في حرب ضد الرجل ضد الذكورة. وأخيرا لمعلوماتكم، كان النظام العالمي تقوده المرأة قبل 3000 عام وكان فاشلا، واضطر الناس إلى تغييره. والآن في أمريكا الجنوبية هنالك مجتمعات متخلفة تقودها المرأة، وإذا ماتت المرأة تنتقل إلى أمها. فإذا ليس الحل في السلطة الأنثوية، الحل في المساواة الحقيقية والنظر للأمور بالكفاءة والأهمية. وأنهي كما قالت الأستاذة ناهية، الحياة ليست عملا يا أستاذة ناهية فقط، الحياة أكبر كبير من فرص العمل. شكرا.
شكرا لحضرتك. نتكلم بالعربي ولا ايه؟ Thank you so much. I just want to say something. What you said is very, very right. Yes, we have to get equality.
No, it's not. No.
Sorry?
Here I am, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying something. I want to comment on what he said. Yes, but we don't have equality yet.
Right.
Even in Egypt, we don't have equality yet. You are giving some examples, but I'm giving some more examples. If you compare the number of ministers, for example, in the Council of Ministers here, we'll find 4 women or female ministers and the rest are men. If we look at the parliament, if we have 19% representation, it's not really relevant to the percentage of women in the society. If we are talking about even in the field of education, the women are under-educated. So I don't think we reached that yet. And maybe also we left the word for men many times, but we are not fighting with men. It's not a fight between men and women. It's only for the sake of the whole society. I would like really to leave to the panel to answer for the 2 questions, and then I'll go back to you.
If you may allow me to briefly attend to definitely the experience of Ataturk and Bourguiba were very, very important ones. However, once Ataturk or the army left and Bourguiba left, there has been different images and different takes on equality in these 2 countries that were not there when Ataturk and Bourguiba were there. And what is important, I believe, is that we do not only impose laws, but we communicate for behavioral change. And this behavioral change has to tackle education, has to tackle religion, and has to tackle media. And what we've been doing here in UN Women, we've been working, and Rasha, my colleague in the audience, on rereading the Islamic text from an engendered eye. And our take is that for the past 14 centuries, with all the good intentions that the fuqaha did or had, most of them were men. So they will not be in a position to put themselves in the shoes of women. And hence our work with Musawa, and now we're working with Rabita Muhammadiyya, and we're extending the work with Azhar to look into the religious text from an engendered eye. We're unveiling sets of rights that were not known to many. including the unpaid work. For example, now in the SDGs, we're talking about the unpaid work and the importance of taking stock of this. 14 centuries ago, Islam did give this space for women if they decide to be inside the house. So it goes as following. If they choose to be inside the house, then they have the right to get economic remuneration for their work inside the house, etc. And why I'm insisting on or highlighting religion, because for those who like and those who do not like, the fact is religion will continue to be part of the societal and emotional makeup of this region. And this is where we need to take stock of it and work on it from within. The same is with education, and the same is with media. Until now, in many of the Arabic language texts in the region, we have sentences like, my father goes to the field to work, my mother stays at home to cook. I play the football with my friends, my sister stays at home to help my mother. And if we have these texts for 6 and 7 and 8-year-olders growing up on this power dynamic, then they will come with the inferiority-superiority dynamic between men and women. So we need to tackle that, and it's not going to take a day or two, it's going to take a generation or two until we reach equality. I stop here. We were hoping that we would have some time to delve into the findings of the Egyptian masculinity survey, but we're going to have the official launch with the National Council for Women in a couple of weeks. So those who are interested, please make sure that you are there.
Thank you. Ms. Abul Komsan, do you have any comment to make?
Allow me to speak in Arabic because I don't know if there is a problem in my English or in the translation, because I feel the question I have received is responded to something I didn't say. في الحقيقة أنا ما كلمتش على نسوانة الدولة، وإن كان expression لطيف I hope so. ليه لأ؟ يعني في طبعا بقدر جدا المداخلات، لكن في الحقيقة عايزة أفرق بس قبل ما أجاوب على ده، إنه في آراء انطباعية وفي آراء مبنية على إحصاءات وتقارير. يعني لو حد جه مكتبي مثلا، مكتب المحاماة، أكيد هيتخيل إن الشعب المصري ده كله ماسك في بعضه وبيقطع بعضه في المحاكم. ولو حد راح عيادة الدكتور وحكم على مصر من عيادة الدكتور هيقول الناس دي كلها مرضى. ولو حد راح قعد في سميرة مس هيحس إن كلنا يعني ناس زي الفل. الآراء الانطباعية في التنمية خطر جدا. يعني لو وقفت قدام مدرسة بنات هحس إن إيه ده؟ البنات كلها بتروح المدارس، ولو وقفت قدام مدرسة ولاد هحس إنه قال لا، أمال فين البنات راحوا فين؟ عشان كده لما بنتكلم على المساواة، إحنا أو أنا شخصياً بلجأ دايماً للتعبئة والإحصاء، وبلجأ للجهاز التنظيم والإدارة. فهدي بس شوية مؤشرات. يعني إحنا عندنا في العمل الرسمي نسبة دخول السيدات للوظائف الحكومية تقريباً الثلث، وبعدين بتترقى فبيحصل دروب للرجال، فبنلاقي مثلاً الستات على أول السلم 38%. لما بتوصل لمدير عام بتبقى 46%. ولما سألنا ده قالوا عشان الرجالة بيسيبوا لشغل أفضل، يعني عنده درجات معينة يبقى عنده اكسبيرينس يروح القطاع الخاص. طيب من بعد مدير عام، وبدا نسبة 46% طبقا لجهاز التنظيم والإدارة، ده جهاز رسمي في مصر. من بعد 46 لما بنبص بقى على حاجة اسمها مدير عام سينيور، يعني 8%. هنا في رقم كبير حصل، في تمييز رهيب حصل. لو الهيراركي ماشي انه الثلث وبيطلع لأولموست النص، ليه عند المناصب العليا فجأة نزل ل 8%، غير انه بيتم عمدا استبعاد النساء؟ لما بنيجي نتكلم على القوانين، مصر حصل فيها في الحقيقة تنظيم قانوني جيد، لكن عندنا كارثة في تطبيق القانون، كارثة. يعني لما الاقي انه مثلا قانون الاحوال الشخصيه، وده ناس كتيره بتفكر فيه، لما يديني الطفل حضانته 15 سنه لكن ما يديش للست الام دي اي حقوق على هذا الطفل. الشغاله اللي بتمسح السلم تتساوى تماما مع أم الطفل بموجب قانون اسمه الولاية على النفس والمال. الست ما تقدرش تعمل تسجل البيبي في شهادة الميلاد، لازم الأب يروح يعمله، رغم أنه لما نرجع للشريعة الإسلامية لما سألوا الرسول قال أمك ثم أمك ثم أمك ثم أبوك، لكن لما نسأل القانون فيقول أبوك ثم عمك ثم جدك، أو أبوك ثم جدك ثم عمك. الأم ما تقدرش تسجل الطفل في شهادة ميلاد، الأم ما تقدرش تعمل للطفل باسبور، الأم ما تفتح للطفل بنك أكاونت، لكن ما تقدرش تسيطر عليه حتى لو فلوسها هي اللي حطاها. اكسترا يعني مش عايزه ادخل في تفاصيل، لكن شايفه ان احنا لما بنتناقش المناقشه دي بنشوف الفجوه فين. لما نيجي نبص على الحاجات تانية ليها علاقه بالرجاله، القضيه ما هيش قضيه خناق ستات ورجاله. البنك الدولي عامل تقرير مهم جدا بيشوف انه ادماج النساء اقتصاديا هو ذكاء اقتصادي، لأنه في الأزمة المالية العالمية في 2008 لما انهارت شركات ضخمة جدا وكاد النظام العالمي كله ينهار، منهم ليمن براذر وحاجات كده، لما حصل أناليسز ليه شركات وقفت في وجه التسونامي المالي اللي حصل في 2008 وشركات بنفس الضخامة انهارت، اكتشفوا انديكيتور غريب جدا ومهم جدا، إن وجود الستات في صناعة القرار في المؤسسات عمل حاجة بيسموها accounting risk، خلاهم قادرين انهم يعملوا ده، في حين ان الرجالة في صناعة القرار بيعملوا حاجة اسمها adventuring risk. ده مش معناه ان حد احسن، لكن معناه انه اي تيم لازم يبقى من الاتنين، علشان لما الرجالة adventuring risk الستات تفرملهم وتسحبهم على الاكاونتنج ريسك فيحافظوا على البلد.
شكرا شكرا. دكتور هانية عندك تعليق؟ طيب احنا دلوقتي عندنا المدموزيل كانت عاوزة تسأل، اتفضلي.
Okay, my name is Dunya. I'm a news reporter. First of all, I'm just wondering if the findings of the statistics you have mentioned at the outset, they are recent or they have just been conducted a long time ago?
No, these are 2017 and they are done by an independent center, which is Basira Center.
Okay, you have said that child marriages rates okay in Egypt are not high as they are being represented in media. Actually, if they are overestimated by media or the press, President Sisi wouldn't have long retreated in like recently in his speeches that we have a problem regarding the overpopulation in Egypt. That is a direct result of the child marriages. So I'd like to ask you as a National Women Council representative, what are the steps that has lately been undertaken by the Council to address this issue?
Okay,
especially in the rural areas, not the civil ones.
Thank you. Thank you. Please.
الأستاذ
أنا اسمي حاتم عبد القادر، صحفي. الحقيقة بس عاوز أعلق على رد الأستاذة نهاد أخيرا. هو طبعا المجال لا يسمح ان احنا حتى في ضبط المصطلحات في المصطلح المساواة بين الرجل والمرأة، لانه المساواة على الاطلاق اعتقد ان هي صعب في كل المجالات، وحضرتك حتى اشرتي في انه كان الاعمال في بعض الشركات في البنية التحتية الى اخره. ولكن لما اتكلمتي على ولاية النفس والمال بموجب القانون اللي بترفضيه وعملت مقارنة بين القانون والشريعة او الشرع، عاوز اسال حضرتك القانون لما قلتي باسبور، هو الباسبور من حق الاب انه يعمله في حاله ان الاب والام منفصلين؟ لانك قلت ان الام ما تقدرش تعمل باسبور وكانه الاب من حقه انه يعمل باسبور، الاثنين ما يقدروش يعملوا باسبور. الاثنين بموافقه، يعني لو واحد عاوز يعمل فبموافقه الطرف الثاني. تخوف تحسبا لان واحد لما بيقولوا بيخطف الولد، اولا يعني حتى الجريمه دي اعتقد ان مسماها في كلا الحالتين، مفيش ام اسمها تخطف ابنها ولا اب هيخطف ابنه، فالاب برضه ما بيعملش. الولايه التعليميه لمين يا فندم؟ بموجب القانون اللي حضرتك برضه بتلومي عليه، لمين الولايه التعليميه؟ يعني عاوز حضرتك ايه زي ما بتقولوا برضه لما بتيجي، فانت هنا ذكرتي الناحيه الايجابيه او الناحيه السلبيه اللي هي في صالح الام المراه، ولم تذكري في الجانب الاخر حق الرجل في هذا الامر. فاذا الموضوع برمته زي ما بنقول هي مش عمليه حرب، ولكن لما نيجي نتكلم عن المشاكل الناتجه ما بين حقوق المراه والرجل في حال انفصال زي ما حضرتك ضربت المثل، والحديث بتاع الرسول كان له سياق، مش موضوع امك ثم امك ثم امك، هو ما كانش انه بيفضل المراه عن الرجل، ولكن سياق الحديث كان ايه؟ ده كلام مهم جدا، وارجو ان حضرتك يعني برضو زي عمليه الحساب او الاكونت اللي حضرتك بتعمليه، مفيش مشكله، ممكن الاب يفتح او الام تفتح، ولغايه ما الولد انه له حق بيبلغ السن القانوني انه يتعامل مع الحساب، مؤكد انه هو هيتعامل من نفسه، لكن القانون الحالي بيدي كل الحقوق للمراه مش للرجل. وانا بعيب هنا على حضرتك في حاجه، اولا ودي صادره منك بقى مش من الرجل، ليه بنشبه ان الام ما بتساويش اللي بتمسح السلم او كده؟ عمر في حد مننا ده رجل انه يقبل اهانه زوجته ولا اهانه بنته ولا اهانه المراه، فمش عارف ليه دايما في خطاب ان احنا بنهين المراه وضد المراه، انا مش فاهم. اشكرك.
شكرا دكتور مديحه، اتفضلي. وانا اعتقد
Thank you. I'm Dr. Madiha Safti, Professor of Sociology. In reference to what you said, Hania, I like this the point of checklist. Yes, at the level of checklist, we have gone a long way ahead. Education, employment, political rights / participation. So this is it. But we lack the spirit of equality, as you said. In my opinion, I believe underlying that is a mindset that is very resistant to that. And going to what you said, Muhammad, the challenge here lies in the educational system and the religious texts. You mentioned the educational system, the texts themselves, how they emphasize gender stereotyping. Suad helps her mother at home, Adil goes to help his father in the field or whatever. So this is an emphasis, in addition to the fact that the teachers themselves emphasize the gender stereotyping. Now, going to the religious texts, yes, I don't know, I don't want to get into that. Is it what is found in the religious text or the interpretation? But definitely, there is a gender stereotyping and discrimination against women. They are not in the favor of women. My question to you, Muhammad, you said you are addressing these issues, education and religion. How are you doing that? Because I know in education, it is difficult, but not as difficult as what is going on in the religious test. What we talk about reform and, you know, all of these words, but no, we don't see any progress in this direction. So I'd like to know what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Nasri.
Last question.
We want last questions.
Thank you. My name is Mariel Davis, and I'm with Education for Employment. I really appreciated the fruitful discussion. My question actually builds off of the professor's question about mindset, specifically the role of the private sector in increasing the rates of women's workforce participation in Egypt. You spoke about a number of different accommodations that employers might make to make a more hospitable environment for women, you know, limiting the hours of a workday or providing restroom facilities, providing transportation. Those all represent really significant costs that I guess would be borne by the employer. So what is the value proposition? What is the motivation for employers to hire higher rates of women?
Thank you so much. Dr. Hania, if you would like to start by responding.
I'll just respond to a few of the questions. I'll start with the last one. I think what I mean by an inclusive approach would be that the private sector should offer paternity leave to men. This is what has happened in Northern Europe. You don't make the cost of hiring women more, you make it equally costly or cheap to hire either men or women. And that's a different mindset from the kind of positive discrimination, and that's what I meant by what is good for society is good for women. So what I meant by that, it's not to say that not to address the needs of women, but I think there are some broad policies that will have the effect of equality, which are as important as the narrower policies which focus on gender. So I think the private sector should have true equality between women and men, including the right to paternity leave. The number of hours people work should be equal. I just want to comment something on the mindset. This really troubles me, because I don't think mindsets are mawruth thaqafi. I think it's something that is recreated every day, and it's recreated because of not just texts or values, but because of conditions. So let me give you an example. We were discussing it just before coming in. There is something called the universal basic income that is being tested in many parts of the world, which means that everyone gets a pension from the government, regardless of their sex, age, whether they work or not. It's a more radical approach to welfare. I think this will have an amazing effect on gender issues. I think the mindset will be undone. It's not just because of what is in texts or what people believe is fed by conditions, things that fortify, that benefit from this kind of manipulation and inequality. Finally, I want to say, Saeed asked a very good question about big men and who benefits women. It's very difficult to keep track of who's in power in the Arab world now. I don't think I know the names of a lot of presidents or so on. But I can tell you that what I believe in genuinely is it should not matter if you're a man or a woman, because there are feminist men, there are masculinist women, and I used to have a professor who used to call Margaret Thatcher he, because he didn't think she was a she. So, and as famously Simone de Beauvoir said, we are not born women, we become women. So that sense of, and what does it mean to be a woman? It means to someone who is committed to equality, to welfare, to lifting the burdens of al-mawruth al-thaqafi. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nasri.
She doesn't call me Mr. Nasri outside of this room. She calls me Muhammad, and sometimes she shouts at me. But thank you, Donia, for questioning the percentages. But whether it was 2% or 20% or 0.0001%, if one girl gets married at the age of 10 or 11 is enough to enact a law to prevent. And this is what happened in Morocco in 2012 when this girl committed suicide because she was forced to marry her rapist. Then they enacted or repealed the law that gave that right to the rapists to marry their victims. So it was only one woman that was enough for her to commit suicide to do that. The other issue on the religion, we take systemically the different notions in the Sunni text. So we're not there at the Shiite text, and we're not yet in the Catholic or the Orthodox religions, and we're going there one by one. But we're working with Musawa, which is a feminist Muslim movement. We're working with the Rabita Muhammadiyya in Morocco, and now we're advancing talks with Azhar to take, we started with the Qiwama and the Wilaya. And how is the Rijal Qawwamuna ala Nisa? ولكن there was the narrative that they are, or the argument that they are giving, it's that it's conditional. And if these conditions are available in the family, where the women are the breadwinners, etc., then there is a differentiation or a different reading for the text. Another issue is the soul of the religion, because as Hania was saying, it's not necessarily always because it has to be the smart thing to do, but because this is the soul and the humane element of equality that brings people and brings societies together, and that is in the religion. It is the mawadda wa rahma. And this is where other notions govern the notion of the relationship between men and women that has to be on an equal basis. So these are how are we going about it. But again, I do invite you to come to the launch of images with the National Council for Women, where Russia is going to be giving the statistics on this.
Thank you so much. I think we have the last question, and then we'll ask Dr. Abul Qumsan to reply as well.
Mr. Nasiri, you referred briefly to the recent move in Saudi Arabia to allow women to drive and so on, which I find very significant, not because women will drive cars, but this means more mobility and probably higher participation in the economic activities, if I'm right. So with Saudi Arabia, who at some point was accused of exporting to us and to the other areas in the Arab region, the Wahhabi movement and all the strict, very strict mindset. So do you think that this is a start for something different that will happen in the Arab world? Will this affect the status of women in the Arab world later on? Thank you.
It will be very difficult to assume at this moment what's the ripple effect of what's going to happen in Saudi Arabia now, because what's the lifting and the space that Saudi Arabia now is opening for women, and women driving was not the only one, it was the last or the most recent, but 2 years ago there were women who appointed to the Shura Council. There was a very avant-garde law on domestic violence that was enacted 1.5 years ago. But what you need to ask, what we need to ask ourselves, what political role is Saudi Arabia going to have? What socio-economic influence is Saudi Arabia going to have over the coming few years with the current happenings at this moment in time? So it's not a standalone gender question, but it is more of a socio-economic political question of where and how is Saudi Arabia going to continue? Is it going to continue to affect the rest of the region or not? And that's a question we still need to wait to answer probably over the coming few months.
Thank you. Dr. Abul Qumsan.
Actually, I wish we have time to dig more in certain areas, like has been mentioned, related to family status law. Definitely, we need a comprehensive family status law, because it seems as there is a lot of misunderstand for some article, but it is not the time or the place to discuss details. But from my experience as a lawyer for 25 years, we need to remaking a new family status law to have a balance and a better relation among all families. When I look to such a chart and see Egypt at 2015 ranking 136 and 2016 have a better steps forward to rank 132, and then back in a women year to 134. This just an indicator that we have a lot of challenges. We need to think about it and see where is the gap in the level of politics or legislation, labor, in all areas. This is the overall ranking of Egypt. We are number 136 in the world. And this is not what Egypt deserves. If we, Excellency Minister said we name ourselves as a mother of the world, this is not our place, definitely. Our place is much better than this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we don't have any more questions, and we are very sorry that we passed the time that was assigned to us. Thank you so much for the speakers. You really enlightened us and enriched our experience. Thank you.